We're about to kick off into the town hall, and our moderators today is a gentleman I think everybody here knows, or if you don't know, you're about to know him pretty quickly. He kicked this thing off, this whole conference off on Tuesday with a tremendous, or Wednesday I guess it was, time's flying, Wednesday with a most vivid description of the challenges facing the United States and her allies and partners in this global environment that continues to evolve as we go forward. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to present to you the Dean of the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts, Admiral Jim Stavridis.
Thanks a lot, Bob. Appreciate it. Well, thank you very much. Terrific to be with everybody today. Have we got the mic? There we go. Thank you. We have a marvelous panel today. We're going to do this as a real town hall. We are living in the season of town halls. Hopefully, we won't see any service chief calling another service chief a big fat liar. I think we can do this probably with a great deal of civility, camaraderie between the leaders of 3 of the sea services. So if I could ask the Commandant of the Marine Corps, the Chief of Naval Operations, and the Vice Commandant of the Coast Guard to please join me up here. We'll go ahead and kick it off. Great to have you here, Commandant. Yeah. The Commandant just said he is not going to sing either. Good. Hey, sir. Good to have you here. Well, what I thought I would do is take the moderator's prerogative and just kick off with a question or two for each of our panelists, and then we'll just kind of open it up to the audience and see where the conversation takes us. So, as we think about this particular conference and the confluence of technology and innovation and its applicability in each of your services, can I ask each of you to say a word about technologies that you think are particularly important? Commandant, we've talked about the air-ground integration so central to your strategy and ideas. Can you start us off on that?
Yes, sir. Thanks. First, thanks for all the folks for putting this, General Shea, FCA and West, for putting the conference together. Opportunity to be here. Good to see you, some old friends. I think there's a huge amount of things in the future that are going to change fundamentally the way we do our business. Not just make it better, but do it in a different way. So there's the part that we don't know, and there's a part that we're doing now as far as digital capabilities, tablets, interface with airplanes, man-unmanned interface, things like that. And so I think we've got to move that way. We're doing a number of experiments with air-to-ground communications. We're going to take a unit, 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, for the next year, and they're going to be our experimental platform, if you will, and we're going to give them capabilities and do it in an efficient way, which I think is giving it to Marines and let them figure out, because they're our best developers and experimenters. That said, I think at the same time there's something we have to pay attention to, and I was talking to General Shea about this. Because of our adversaries, our potential adversaries' capabilities, what is our critical capability and our center of gravity can also very quickly become our critical vulnerability.
Yeah, exactly.
And so how do we protect the network? How do we protect what we've got and enable ourselves to leverage the communications and the weapons systems that we have? And then what do we do if there's not enough resiliency or that network becomes degraded or it goes away? Indeed. And so that poses a whole other set of problems, and how do you operate the way that we learned growing up to operate, without radios, using visual, talking on wire on phones that can't be jammed. They can be cut, but they can't be jammed. So go into this with our eyes wide open, but be watching over our shoulder to make sure that we're not just kidding ourselves that we've got a capability that doesn't have risk.
Let me press one more round with you, Commandant, if I could. First of all, the idea of using entity as an experimental platform, I think, is terrific. And I'm going to ask the CNO to bounce off that in a moment based on his background working at the old Joint Forces Command and in innovation there. But Commandant, could you say something about virtual training, as in virtual training? How does that fit into the vision?
I think the training systems we have, as far as simulators and simulation, are pretty good for individual task condition standard, for air crew, for individual, for drivers, for even firing individual weapons, gunnery, things like that. I think the thing that we're looking for is, where's the equivalent of our holodeck, where a fleet commander or a division commander or an air wing commander can go in and get a rep. Right now, that almost requires the actual provision of the real stuff, which is really expensive. And so, if many of you have read the book and probably saw the movie Ender's Game, where's our Ender's Game battle lab kind of thing, where we can not just give our leadership reps, but we can actually find out who the really good leaders are. And I know that it's going to happen. And I think also looking at ourselves, there are some things that we have that I'm not sure we're leveraging because we haven't written it into the training manual that says, okay, before you do this live, you have to do, the aviation's community is much ahead of the ground side on this, but because they would never fly a sortie in the training and readiness manual without flying the thing multiple times in the sim. The ground community's got to catch up to that because we can't afford to not take every opportunity to be successful when we do it live because we just can't afford to, we don't have the time or the money, the ammunition to do it again. So when we get that chance to do it live, we got to at least have the highest probability it's going to be effective and successful.
Powerful. So CNO, want to pick up that thread a little bit, both with technologies that really matter, innovation, and also maybe a little bit of the great work you did, I recall, as a one-star back at the Joint Forces Command.
Well, first of all, I think I just want to echo General Neller, and I said it this morning during my pinch hit morning session, that I think this conference is just terrific. And so bringing everybody together, active duty, industry, you really do, I mean, this is an innovation lab in and of itself, right? All of these connections are being made, these deals being done, and I think that things like this are extremely valuable for building those partnerships. Where I'm focused, looking forward, certainly there's these information technologies and the whole business of information management, which is going to be so fundamental to our way forward. But it's enabling a lot of other things, and I think particularly for the Navy, if you think about what we do on ships, in isolation at sea, things like additive manufacturing, 3D printing. If you think about how that could revolutionize our logistics chain there, where you just can make it on board, those things have me very excited. And then as our networks and systems get more complicated, more complex, as computing power skyrockets, there is this sort of artificial intelligence aspect, which is really starting to have, an impact. I think it's just getting started. And that leads you to the next challenge, I think, that we have to address in the Navy, which is, what is the future environment for collaboration between man and machine, right? People and machines. And so, we've got a lot of people who drive, for instance, and I think that is a skill set that is just, it's on the decline already. If you haven't heard it, the rate, the derivatives are all in the downside, and we just, as just an example, we just don't want to have a lot of drivers standing around wondering what they're going to do now that their vehicles are being driven by automated technology. So we've got to try and shoot out in front of that, particularly in the area of, I think, artificial intelligence. There's big moral questions that we have to come through to be able to employ that sensibly. Where's the right place to ensure that people are involved in that decision-making, throttling, and the risk to the appropriate level, et cetera. With respect to managing innovation, And I'm sure that you've read, there's all sorts of models. There's kind of the Joint Forces Command model, which was terrific as a center for innovation. And there are others in the private sector, Bell Labs and other places. But what we're also seeing by virtue of everybody being connected is kind of this democratized approach to innovation, where you have these people, just because they're interested, they self-identify, they're super users. You know, Eric von Hippel has this book called Democratizing Innovation. And if we could just tap into all the super users out there in the Navy and even beyond, you talk about Ender's Game. You know, there's a monstrous online gaming environment right now. How can we tap into that and get sort of millions of runs at a particular problem in an online gaming environment? Something that we would maybe never consider with a smaller group. So, I mean, there's just so much opportunity out there. It's really a matter of how do you manage it all with the appropriately light touch that doesn't smother it.
Perfect. I'm going to bounce off the comment on autonomous to tell you, before coming to do this conference, I was in Munich for the Munich Security Conference annual event, and I did a panel like this as a former Supreme Allied Commander. At the opposite end, where the Vice Commandant is sitting, was the head of Human Rights Watch, and the subject was man, machines, and morals.
Right.
And it is a huge debate. Not only beginning here, but in Europe, where one would expect it is front and center in this conversation. And we do have to pass our way through that narrow passage, I think, with a real sense of our values as well as our technology. So I'm so glad to hear you raise that. So, Vice Commandant, let's talk cyber. I know the Coast Guard is doing quite a bit in this zone, as are all the services, and maybe we'll walk back this way. If I could ask each of you to just say a word about cyber and how that fits with your vision in the service.
Well, thank you. And Admiral Zukunft rolled out for the first time our Coast Guard cyber strategy, the first that we've ever had. Breaks down to 3 basic lines of effort: defending our networks, enabling operations, and protecting infrastructure. And the protecting infrastructure piece deals with the regulated industry partners that the Coast Guard is responsible for: port partners, shipping partners, et cetera, et cetera. Our Commandant believes, and I believe too, that we're uniquely positioned in cyber for a federal agency. We're both a military agency, so we ride on .mil, but we're also a law enforcement agency and a member of the Department of Homeland Security, so we're deeply burrowed into .gov, plus we're on .com with our regulated industry partners. So we bring what the Coast Guard always brings to the fight, a unique array of authorities, and we bring that into cyber as well. And it's intimately threaded throughout all our physical world mission sets. There's no question about it. As a matter of fact, I think one of the Commandant's major challenges is going to be creating the culture in our organization to allow us to operate in cyberspace and treat it as an operational domain. I can tell you the Coast Guard, probably like many federal agencies, is kind of a foot in both camps of, this is an IT support function, get me a new mouse or a display, one of those things. Or is this an operational domain where the basic risk calculations, the situational assessments should be done by operators? And I think this Commandant recognizes that it's the latter, but to actually mission the organization in that direction is going to be a significant challenge. One thing I will say for our industry folks out there is the technologies that you bring into the fight, the awareness of those technologies that are available to the Coast Guard, I think are going to be a part of the solution that's going to allow us to thread this needle and to demonstrate to the operators that this is not just a mission support function. This is operations. These are operational tools. These are operational risk assessments that are integrally related with the other operational risk assessments that you got. But we're on the first step of the 1,000-mile march, as Mal would say, but I think we're headed in the right direction under Admiral Zukunft's cyber strategy.
And are you creating a specialty in the Coast Guard? Are you going to have cyber Coast Guardsmen, or will this be a subspecialty that people have? how will that work for the Coast Guard?
Sir, I mean, that's a symptom or a subset of these larger, basic organizational decisions that we in the Coast Guard are going to have to get our arms around.
Sure.
We've kind of watched the Navy with their N2, N6. I guess we don't call it information dominance anymore. I heard Admiral Kohler talking before. I guess we've kind of maybe changed the name on that, but that's actually a model that we've taken a look at. Whether we're willing to make that jump or not, I don't know the answer to that. We're going to have to get our arms around that because the ability to recruit, develop, and retain a workforce, including providing them with meaningful career paths on both the officer, enlisted, and civilian side, we got to be able to get at if we're going to compete for the best and brightest. And I think that the world of cyber, the Coast Guard will either live or die, succeed or fail, not based on the technology, not based on the policies, but based on that gray matter that exists between the two ears of our Coast Guard men and women. That's how we've always succeeded as an organization, and it's one of Admiral Zukamp's tasks to set the battle space to allow us to do that. But it's a great question because we're struggling with that right now as to how we want to recruit, develop, and retain that workforce of the future, and exactly the issues that you hit on there, sir.
Yeah. Well, it came to my mind when the Commandant mentioned Ender's Game, because that's really a cyber force. So, CNO, how's the Navy approaching all this? We had Vice Admiral Ty here this week, had a chance to chat with her. How's it look from your perspective,
No, I
sir?
think I'm encouraged. We've got to start on this, and I think our organization, we're organized for success at this point. And what we're finding is that in many ways we can rely on some very familiar concepts to approach this cyber mission. Sure, it happens, instantaneously across the world. I mean, there's certainly some very unique parts of it, but there are also many, many familiar parts of it in terms of setting up a defense of a network, and then knowing right off the bat that defense will never be impenetrable. And so, how do you then, develop the sensing system inside the wall, if you will, for the inevitable leaker?
Right.
And then once you find it, how do you isolate it as quickly as possible? Those fundamentals we have in our seawater systems, we have them in our electrical distribution systems. We know how to do this sort of thing. And so what we found is that once we sort of calmed down and studied the problem a little bit, there are many things that are new about it, but there are many things that are familiar about it. And so we're trying to demystify it a little bit, to the point that the Vice Commandant made. We're starting to recruit people. We've got cyber mission teams that are standing up, and they have different focus areas, whether they're protect or what have you. And we're starting to deploy those, and we're learning even from that hey, maybe our initial model wasn't quite optimal for as we settle in and practice it. And so we're open to changing that if that's where the data and experience takes us. You can't grow it fast enough.
Yeah.
That's the one thing. You just bring these people in, and then there's a significant amount of training to get somebody up. At the end of the day, that force may or may not look like the folks that are manning other parts of the Navy, but we have to be open to all these possibilities because it's absolutely vital that we have an effective force there.
Yeah, so Commandant, the cyber warriors of the Marine Corps, they're still going to have high-end tights?
They're going to be Marines.
Exactly.
There are certainly there's a lot of talent out there, but whatever they are, they're going to be Marines. They're going to meet the standard of being a Marine. But I think I'd just make 3 points, Admiral. First, we've already mentally accepted the fact that it's the fifth domain of the battle space. We're fighting. There's cyber fighting going on right now. I mean, our network's under attack. I'm assuming many of the business folks out here commercially, your network's under attack. So there's fighting going on right now. And these cyber mission teams that CNO mentioned, we're all on the dot to provide those to Admiral Rogers and Admiral Haney at Stratcom. Organizationally, we watched what the Navy did, and we formed a information warfare command that's being run by our MAR 4 cyber commander, Brigadier General Laurie Reynolds. And part of that organization is our director for intelligence and our communications. So we got intel, comm, and cyber in a kind of a collab, and we're just starting to figure out the power of that. And then the question is, how do you drive that organizational change down to the MAGTAF? Is it a staff function? Do we take radio battalion and comm battalion and intel battalion and split them out and make them a information warfare command? Do we in the G3 have a G39? We've done a lot of different things, but eventually we're going to have to close on that and snap the chalk. And we're going to do that. And then we're going to have to figure out where we're going to get the Marines to do that, because I think we all believe we believe we're underinvested in that. We just don't know what the number is. And then the last part is the training piece. With all due respect to many of the military members still on active duty in here, they're much younger than I, so I can say this, but they grew up in an environment in OIF and OEF where they assumed that they had 100% comm, that they assumed the network was accurate, that they assumed the server was going to work and the computer was right and the GPS was accurate and the radio, the SVoIP, wherever it was, Merc Chat worked 100 over 100, and if it didn't, they all just kind of turned into a big pile of goo. And as opposed to when we grew up, that if the radio worked half the time, we were ecstatically happy. And I was the only one, in Iraq carrying a flash signal mirror and a whistle, just because that was what was in my pouch.
Exactly.
I never got it out from 1982. But we're unplugging ourselves, because we realize, and the MEF commanders, division wing, MLG commanders realize, hey, turn it off. What are you going to do? Turn it off. It doesn't work, or we can't trust it. How are you going to train for that? And so we have to have a way to train for that. We have to change. It's just a mindset. We can't assume that it's going to be there. We're going to do everything we can to protect it and make sure it is.
Sure.
But I don't think we can count on it, whether it's, the Navy's back to doing celestial navigation. We're still, you still got maps, still got compasses, and we have to retain those skills.
Wonderful. I'll close out the cyber piece by simply pointing out, again, going back both to, I was in Davos the week before and then in Munich for the security conference. A big part of the conversation is offensive cyber activities. And again, it ties to the questions of, is it moral and ethical to attack the electrical grid of a country, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we have not only the train, equip, and organize ideas that all three of you have articulated, but I think also these larger issues we're going to have to wrestle with. So let me kind of spin operationally in two dimensions. And if I can, I'm going to start with you, the balance of op-tempo. And I know you've been doing a lot of thinking about this. Our forces are coming off extraordinary decade of combat, more than a decade, 15 years. How you, as Oprah would say, how do you feel about op-tempo for the Navy right now? And then I'll ask your brothers in arms here.
Well, I'll quote General George Marshall as, I'll save my feelings for Mrs. Richardson, but I'll tell you what I think about it.
Exactly.
The op-tempo thing, first we have to start with a plan to come down to sustainable levels. And so I think that there is a move in all of the services to come back to at least the starting point is a level, a tempo of operation that can be sustained. And so we kind of converged on a model of a 7-month deployment, and our plan really gets to everybody deploying for no longer than 7 months, really at the end of this year. And we're moving so that fewer and fewer ships are deploying for longer than that, and by the end of this year, nobody will be planned for that.
Including the carriers, including the amphibs.
Including the carriers and the amphibs will all be 7 months or fewer. In fact, the highest demand force is ballistic missile defense, those DDGs. So those are the guys that really feel the pinch. Having said that, as we sit in the tank, maritime forces are the ones that are always kind of those GFM issues, if you will, and so we still remain in great demand. the world will get a vote, right? And we're not here to just kind of be a self-looking ice cream cone, but at least our plan has to be sustainable. And departure from that plan, we understand the readiness debt that we incur, and we should have some kind of recovery plan as well. Now we got to execute the plan, right? And so that means getting our maintenance right. General Neller and I were out looking at aircraft maintenance this morning together on North Island.
Excellent.
Admiral Shoemaker and his team doing a terrific job to just kind of bring discipline to that. Ship maintenance, the whole thing. Training, all has to come together. The people have to flow in at the right time. We have to get through our training pipeline and then up to basic, integrated, and then certified and deploy. So there's an execution part of this as well that we have to pay attention to so that we can relieve folks on time. I talk a lot in the design about speeding up. And some people have said, well, hey, it's been going pretty hard for a while now, and you're talking about speeding up. It's really a different character of speed. It's kind of, working smarter, not harder type of a thing. And so it's really, when I talk about that, it's the ability to adapt more quickly, not, run faster for longer type of a thing. So there's a little bit of difference in the nature of how I talk about it. So, that's kind of how I'm thinking about that right now.
Thank you, CNO. Commandant, same question. Up tempo, how's it going for our Marines?
We're always struggling to find that knee in the curve between supporting the combatant commander requirements and the maintenance and readiness of our gear and the desire of Marines to go do things. Nobody joined the Marine Corps to sit on their sea bag at Camp Lejeune or Camp Pendleton. And then you go in 60% of your forces under the age of 25, they want to go. So we're trying to find that place, where we can sustain ourselves, maintain the mission essential tasks, and keep our gear ready. Aviation's a lot harder right now because for a lot of reasons, like CNO said, we're working and with the Admiral Schumacher and General Davis and our folks and Admiral Gross-Clags and everybody on trying to find it and find that place where we can get our aviation readiness back. And I'd commend the Navy on, particularly on amphib readiness. I'm working really hard. Admiral Tyson, and when we were on the East Coast, and General Kaufman's here, and now she's on the West Coast, trying to be good shipmates, because the ships have to get fixed, but they got to have their yard time, but we got to have our time on the ship. So, when the ship's out, we're ready to go, and we don't waste our time. So, that said, coming down to 182,000 at the end of this FY, we're a 2-to-1 force. Not everybody's at 2-to-1.
Yeah.
2-to-1 is the bare minimum that we really think we can sustain.
Sure.
A normal life, prepare, have enough time to get ready. We'd much rather be a 3-to-1 force.
Yeah.
But right now the world is not cooperating.
Yeah.
And so we'll continue to do as much as we can to the point where I'd have to tell the chairman or the secretary, hey, look, I want to support the combatant commander, but here's the risk. You tell us to, we're not going to say no.
Yeah.
But understand that there's a bill at the end of this.
Long-term
if you
cost.
keep doing this like this, whether it's people staying or gear being ready. And so that's always the tension you have. And it's good to have the discussions. And I think the other services, not just the sea services, but as CNO said, we're the forward presence folks. We're the cop on the beat. We don't, we want to keep it in phase 0. We want to keep the fight from happening. If it happens while we're out there, okay, that's fine too. But we believe that maritime naval forces are what are going to keep potential adversaries deterred and our allies assured.
Thanks. And I do have to say, as 7.5 years as a combatant commander, the support that I received from your predecessors was terrific in those years. But I also particularly want to say, General Neller, when you were on the Joint Staff working those issues, you were terrific at balancing that.
I still have PTS from that time.
The J3 himself in person. So the Coast Guard has this marvelous mix of missions. When the fight comes, you're with us. I deployed as a strike group commander with a Coast Guard cutter in my strike group, but you also do marvelous things on the waterways of this nation. Talk to us a little, Vice Commandant, about op-tempo in the Coast Guard world.
Well, mission balance is always a challenge for the Coast Guard, whether it's in peacetime or in time of conflict. Always seems to be more demand for Coast Guard than there are Coast Guard resources to go around, and that's where we find ourselves right now. Particularly, we're in the midst of recapitalizing our very old fleet, some of which our ships are over 50 years old, bringing new ships onto the line. But Admiral Zukunft has been pretty clear. He's come out with our 4 strategies where we're putting our effort: Western Hemisphere, cyber, Arctic, and energy. The Western Hemisphere and the Arctic, which also includes the Antarctic region as well, drive our mission balance. And in Western Hemisphere, we have taken risk in other mission areas to provide additional resources down to your old AOR, sir, down in Southcom, dealing with the trafficking and organized crime that plagues that area, which still has amongst the most highest homicide rates in the world. As a symptom of that instability that exists in that area, we had 50,000 unaccompanied children show up at our southwest border, still have tremendous instability in that area, in part fueled by the drug trade, illegal human trafficking, firearms trafficking, and the whole bit. And the Coast Guard provides unique authority and really is the nation, not only the nation's, but our region's forward defense against much of this trafficking effort. And Admiral Zukunft's placing of additional resources down there resulted last year in JADF South interdicting over 190 metric tons of cocaine, which was policed up off the water before it even could get onto the land. That's the most that's been taken since 2009. And it's not just about the cocaine, but that is a primary funding source for these transnational criminal organizations that create death, destruction, devastation in all the nations to our south, much less our own citizenry, when it brings up here, and it creates, insecurity at the border, which, you mentioned about the elections before. I mean, this is an electoral issue. And I remain concerned in this area because Colombia has decided that they are going to end aerial eradication. I think you're aware of that. I won't go into the reasons why, but that has potential implications for all the neighborhood down there. So the Commandant has been placing additional resources down there. The Navy's had a hard time putting surface ships down there because you guys are fully occupied in other areas. But it does come at a cost. Risk in other mission sets. We've had to turn down various other combatant commanders who very much desire to have Coast Guard presence for various reasons, whether it's migration in the Mediterranean or the problems set down in the South China Sea or piracy or any of these other things where the Coast Guard kind of adds unique value in there. We've had to turn those down, but the Commandant has made the risk calculation that he feels that our forces are most uniquely positioned and best serve not only our nation but our neighbors by applying effort down in the Western Hemisphere transit zone for right now. The one other area I'll talk about on the Arctic about op-tempo, and we can talk about icebreakers later, but I'll just give you,
let's talk about icebreakers right now.
Here's a stat on the Polar Star, which is a 40-year-old ship that's been refurbed. It's kind of interesting. It's real high tech, and then you see like the knife switches and Frankenstein's lab in the back when you actually go see this thing. But that crew last year was 302 days away from home port and likely to be repeated again this next year. So that's the op-tempo we're having to run because we only have one operating heavy icebreaker.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask you, Vice Commandant, how many icebreakers does Russia have?
Polar-class icebreakers, Russia has 40 with another 11 under construction.
I want you to say that again. How many does Russia have?
40 with another 11 under
Exactly.
construction, a number of which are nuclear, the most powerful icebreakers on the Earth. The U.S. now has 3 icebreakers. One is broken, the Polar Sea. Another one is the refurb Polar Star, the only heavy icebreaker that the United States operates. And the last is Healy, which is a medium class icebreaker, and that's it. That's all the Schlitz on the shelf for
and we'll get off icebreakers momentarily, but Denmark, a nation of 5 million people, has 6 icebreakers. China, which has no real estate on the Arctic, has 11 icebreakers. This is really, I think, an interesting question that we need to explore at another time. But Vice Commandant, thank you for a wonderful operational riff on our marvelous Coast Guard. So I'm going to let the audience get in here in a minute. If you'd like to walk up to the 2 microphones here. While the audience warms up and is coming up, I'm going to take advantage of having 2 very senior members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff here just to do one spot of current business, which is we awoke this morning to reports of airstrikes in Libya against the Islamic State. Can I ask the CNO and Commandant, not about that specific issue at all, but the campaign against the Islamic State, kind of the Navy's role and the Marine Corps' role as you see it unfolding, recognizing that all of our crystal balls are a little cloudy. And as members of the audience want to come up, we'll take some questions.
Yeah. Bob, you want to take a first stab there?
Okay. Right now, I mean, if you break it into regions, go Iraq, Syria, then Libya.
Okay, perfect.
So there's a special purpose MAGTF along with a Marine Expeditionary Unit operating in the CENTCOM AOR. A portion of that special purpose MAGTF, which is built around a Osprey squadron, a fixed wing squadron, an infantry battalion, and a logistics capability. A portion of that force is in Iraq at Al-Assad and Taqadum in Anbar province, supporting a Marine advisor team and a number of special forces, both U.S. and coalition, that are training Iraqi military, Iraqi police, and tribal fighters. And it was the force that was in Taqadum that was supportive of the Iraqi force that went into Ramadi eventually and retook that town. There's also some Marine, there's also a MARSOC, Combined Joint Task Force Headquarters, or SJOTF, that's being led by a Marine Colonel named Andy Milburn that's operating in and around there. So we've got Marines that are part of the Joint Force working for General McFarland over there. The aircraft that we have operating in the region also are part of the strike campaign. Where they're bombing, I don't track on a daily basis, but more in Iraq than in any other areas. As far as the Syria op, there are Marines that are just part and through the force structure there. On the Libya thing, my guess is we've got another special purpose MAGTF that's actually in support of AFRICOM, but it's kind of multi-based in Morone and Italy and then actually in Romania, some Marines in Bulgaria. And so normally when there's operations with aircraft or people that operate in North Africa or in and around, those Marines are there to provide a potential reaction force or a trap.
Sure.
So my guess is, depending upon what the platform was that did this strike, that those Marines were on step to go recover those any air crew that may have had malfunctions or something. So I think everybody's frustrated to some degree about the speed of the campaign. Although when I talk to Marines, and I've talked to some folks over in the last few days, they're actually pretty upbeat.
Good.
I don't think that. I think there's a lot more good things going on. It's not happening as fast as we may like to see it, but at the same time, we're particularly in Iraq. There's a sovereign government there, and it's their country, and we're there to help them. And so we'll do what we can to try to accelerate the thing. But I think everybody's kind of positive. It's all trending. I mean, if you look to where we were a year ago, and when ISIL first came in. And there's a lot of ways to measure it, territory controlled. I think it's going to happen eventually. Syria may be a little more problematic. And I think Libya, I think it's good that we're fine. And there's a lot of coalition support, as you know, a lot of concern in Europe and NATO because of the migration that runs through Libya. And the Italians, for example, have a lot of equity in Libya. And they would like to get it some stability there with the government, but that's easier said than done.
Yeah, thanks. CNO.
If I could just pile onto this, certainly the Navy is fully integrated with the Joint Force and responding there, and the coalition as well. But what we're realizing is, first, this is a transnational type of a thing, and if we don't approach it from a transnational perspective, then we're just going to, last night it was Libya, in the future it's going to be somewhere else. And so you really have to have a global perspective of this and try and smother it from a global approach. And so really nothing is purely regional anymore. Right? Everything is at least trans-regional, if not global. Similarly, I think that both the campaign against ISIL global counterterrorism, and also the cyber campaign that you mentioned, is blurring the lines between what would be sort of a traditional linear phase 0, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 approach to conflict. And so, how do you characterize a campaign that might be, in phase 2.5 in the cyber domain, phase 2 maybe with some of this, coercion just below the threshold of traditional phase 3 conflict, and maybe kind of legitimately phase 0, phase 1 in other areas. It really is very non-linear, and I think we have to kind of approach it intellectually a little bit differently, both in kind of in time and space. And that's, I think, right at the heart and center of really some of these calls for defense reform. And so as we think our way through that, I think we have to understand the different character of the world that we're in right now.
Thank you. And I'll just add to that, if I may, as we think so often of the hard power solutions, that part of the long game is on the soft power side, and finding that balance is something that all of your services are contributing to mightily. Well, let us now take some questions from the audience. Please mention your name and affiliation, and then if you want to steer the question toward an individual or to the panel, please. And we'll start with my good friend, Captain Sam Tangretti.
I guess I don't have to identify myself. This is for the CNO and Commandant Marine Corps. If we actually bend some steel on the distributed lethality concept, are you guys working through the implications for the amphibious force? Just a little background. Centuries ago, when I was CO of an LSD who relieved destroyers in their functions and did a lot of independent ops, I harassed Commandant Surfpack to get us some canister launchers off decommissioned DDs, Swig 1 Alpha, pull the wires, and make us a test platform so we have some modest war at sea capability. And the answer was, not only would it take NAVC years to study it, but we're afraid the Marines won't let us do it because that blurs the mission of the amphib force if now we're pretending LSD is a DD. Would you comment? Are you working through that issue? Thank you.
You get to go first this
Okay.
time.
Yeah. Well, really, I'll tell you what. Either one of us could start on this answer, and we'd arrive at the same place because Commandant and I have been talking about exactly that. And first and foremost, if you leave the room with anything, leave the room with the clear idea that we are joined at the hip to address naval warfare. And that's going to include, when you combine that with the ideas in both the guidance that both of us have just issued, you're going to see a lot of experimentation in terms of force composition and what platforms, what capabilities we put on individual platforms, and then how we combine those platforms together in new force packages. And so to the answer to the question is absolutely yes. I don't know that distributed lethality really requires, maybe you were just using the analogy of bending steel, but we've got an awful lot of steel out there right now and people that can get at these things very creatively. And if you think about a 3-ship SAG in support of an amphibious ready group, that's an amazingly powerful force, particularly when enabled with some of these information technologies and capabilities that are there. Distributed lethality, any sensor can be connected to any shooter type of a thing. That's a very flexible and resilient model as we build out that network. And so we're very committed to doing this together. Both of us have committed to doing that not only in practice but in our guidance. We're on the record, if you will. And so, absolutely, I would say a very enthusiastic yes.
Commandant.
I think that the world situation that we have has created opportunity for the naval force. The last, 10 or 15 years, we've been able to kind of do our own thing because we were pretty much tied to fighting ashore, and the Navy was out doing what they did, whether it would be ballistic missile defense. But when you look at Russia and Europe, look at the Atlantic, look at the South China, I'm looking at Admiral Swift down here. I mean,
Just look at Admiral Swift. Yeah.
He's
That's a
he's the one that
dangerous
should
man.
be answering these questions. No. So I think there's at least when the CNI talk, we're always talking about the naval force. I think, the days when the Marines, well, I only do this because this is what the Marines do, or the Navy only does this what the Navy does, those days are gone. We can't afford that. We don't have enough ships. So we all got to work together to provide the combat capability. So part of it, it might be weaponizing, putting more weapons on amphib ships. But I think more importantly, I think it's what Admiral Richardson said. It's if there were one thing with the amphibs, other than there's not enough of them, I mean, they are the most beautiful ships in the ocean, I do believe. Other than get rid of steam power, I would suggest that to get this connectivity, to get this integration with a network, we're going to have to put a little more investment in the command and control on board all the ships so that we can take advantage of the network, so we can take advantage of the fact that in another year for Pac Fleet, Admiral Swift's going to have F-35s on big deck amphibs. So now we got Ospreys, we got F-35s. We're out there operating with the carrier strike. We need, if we're going to put Marines ashore, we are not going to do that ourselves. We know that. Whoever the adversary is, we have to help get ourselves to the objective area if part of the mission is to put Marines on the land. So whether it's sea control, whether it's fighting our way, advanced force ops, we're back to read U.S. Marines in Amphibious Warfare by Isley and Crowell. Talks about the campaigns in the Pacific in World War II. And we're never going to get to that scale, but the same ideas, the same teamwork, the same cooperation, the same willingness to experiment, adjust, and change, that's where we're going to go.
CNO, you wanted in?
I just want to kind of come in on top of that because he mentioned the F-35. The thing that's going to drive this and take it to the next level is the Joint Strike Fighter on both of those platforms and in the Air Force. And the capability that brings, particularly the situational awareness and the just this ability to sense and communicate, is going to stitch us all together. And you combine that with Aegis Baseline 9, and you've got just a tremendous, very resilient network. Yeah. And we need to expand that to the amphibs, but it's that JSF that's going to bring us all to this table.
Yeah, I agree. That's the centerpiece, and the mix and match capability is really extraordinary. Sir.
Liu, Voice of America. I have a question on the cyber issue. Admiral Stavridis, I think you have advocated a separate joint cyber force. So I wonder if each service chief present here would agree with that, to have this part of work be done by a separate command or separate cyber force, rather than tasking them individually for this specific, very difficult task. Thank you.
Vice Commandant.
Well, like I said, I think we bring unique authorities as a member of the Coast Guard and be happy to participate as part of the joint member. Like I said, Coast Guard operates substantially on .mil, .gov, and .com. It's the only member of the armed forces that sort of does all that because of our unique character. We'd be happy to participate in a joint force. I think it makes us stronger, and I think that's the way to go. That's my view.
CNO?
I think just the opposite, actually, that this is, well, not the opposite of the Commandant, opposite of the proposal implied in the question. I'm right with the Vice Commandant all the way.
Good recovery.
Yeah. I think that this must be integrated, right? If we have a completely standalone type of a thing, it's going to be just that much more difficult to integrate it into operations, into the planning and the execution, the debriefing, all of that. And so while there are potentially some unique skill sets and capabilities, it's through that deep integration into the fundamentals, the early, just the basic ingredients of warfare going forward that I think is going to make cyber achieve its full potential.
Commandant.
We actually do have a single command on Title 10. We have Cybercom. Admiral Rogers is also director of NSA, is also Commander of Cybercom, wearing his other hat. And we all have components that support that. And we also have combatant commands and other forces that we support. So Admiral Richardson's correct. It's a very integrated team. Now, will Cybercom no longer be a subunified command? Will it become a separate component? That's something that's probably going to come out in discussions that there's been a lot of hearings with the Senate Armed Services Committee on Goldwater-Nichols, revision, review, change to Goldwater-Nichols, and I think that's something that'll come out of the discussion. But right now, I think we're in a good place, but we have to grow our capability in support of the integrated joint cyber force, because there are certain, as Admiral Stavridis said, the most difficult thing with cyber is not so much the actions that they do, it's the authorities and permissions and the legalities because of kind of the unique nature of that domain. It's kind of hard to bound it because it crosses into commercial, private, personal, business, and everything. And so it's a very difficult problem, but we're making progress.
I'll just make the point to specify that I have not advocated for the immediate establishment of a cyber force, but rather that now is the time to have the conversation about it. And I will make the point that if you go back about 100 years ago, the analogy would be air forces. And many of the arguments of integration and it's got to all flow together, we heard those in counter to the idea of an air force. Yet today, I don't think we could imagine our military without an air force. I suspect in 50 to 100 years, we will say, of course we need a cyber force. But that conversation, as you see by the variety of answers right here, is really just beginning. Again, as though we were 100 years ago just learning to fly airplanes. We're just starting to understand cyber. I'm going to go right over here and then back to this gentleman, please.
Thanks, Admiral. Lieutenant Roger Misso. I work in the Pentagon. Gentlemen, thanks for being here.
I'm sorry you work in the Pentagon.
It's nice to see everybody in San Diego.
In fact, Roger, I know exactly where you work, so you better be merciful with this question.
On the topic of innovation, it's interesting to note that some of the topics that you've raised today, like additive manufacturing, the Fleet Battle Lab, and autonomous systems, were introduced and championed in many cases by junior officers and enlisted, and certainly will be used by junior officers and enlisted when we look a lot like you and fight the wars of tomorrow. As we read this morning on the Naval Institute blog, these organizations...
Was that a compliment or not? I don't think so.
Just keep taking, Roger. You're doing fine.
I got you, sir.
You're never leaving the Pentagon.
Great. Organizations of these JOs and junior enlisted, as we read this morning in the Naval Institute blog, seem to be on the decline, and we're losing these individuals to attrition rather than, say, having a mechanism to make them GS-14s and 15s and project leads of these projects that they've introduced. CNO, I guess, where do junior officers and junior enlisted fit into your innovation vision?
Well, Roger, you know that I'm walking this walk as well, because we've had these conversations in the hallowed halls of the Pentagon. I think that the best result is going to come from dialogue, and the cadre of very young, digitally native, if you want to say, millennials, if you want to say, there's a lot of tags that have been used, but it's just a tremendously energetic and talented pool of people that know things that that have come up since we were active in that world, and so we need to learn from that. So we need to tie into that and organize that. The organization has to be again such that it's not a smothering type of a thing that squelches the very innovation that it's trying to stimulate. On the other hand, we've had these conversations as well. That mentoring relationship also is very valuable, and so as we have these conversations, certainly we are open to the terrific ideas that super talented cadre of folks has, but also we have to be teaching. right? And there's things that we can offer as well, just from experience and perspective and those sorts of things. And that, I think, is going to create that really exciting relationship between two ends of a career that will allow us to be as fresh and current and take advantage of all of what's new, but also inspire this generation to stay, Navy in my perspective. We talk a lot about, and you can read a lot about what inspires and what are the expectations of the generation, and we have so much of that available in the Navy right now. If you want to change jobs every 2 years, you hear about that. They're going to, well, guess what? I've changed jobs every 2 years for the last 33 years, so I can help you there. You want to be operational and worldwide? I can help you there. You want to maybe stay in a particular fleet concentration area and let your kids come through school? We've got that flexibility. And so our self-talk and our ability to connect our detailing world with the values down to the individual level of each one of our service members, I think is another a part of this covenant that we have to map our options to your values as personally as possible. And so we just have to explore all of those flexibilities as we move forward. It's much more than about the new technological idea. That's terrific, and we're going to be open to all of that. But it's these personal relationships. That's what the shared values and the communication of that. That, I think, Roger, is what inspires people to stick around and continue to serve.
Great, thanks, sir.
I'm going to take from the head nods by the Commandant and the Vice Commandant. They're in agreement. We have time for 2 more questions, and I'm going to ask both of the 2 gentlemen here to be very brisk and brief in your question. Go right to the question. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Commandant, at Marine Corps Information Operations Center, where I am at, Sergeant Edon, we're very excited to see how we're going to implement your FRAGO, with 1B being the increase in the information operations. How do you see us overcoming the 2 challenges to military information support operations? The first, that to have a good influence operation, you have to have access to the population. And as AFO has been taken away from the MU medal, we don't necessarily have phase 0 access to a target population to do target audience analysis. And the second is in the R2P2 planning process, we promised our combatant commanders that we can operate and give them a solution in 6 hours. However, MISO programs require approval from all the way up to the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, and they require Chief of Mission concurrence as well. So when I write those programs, what mechanism do we have in place to ensure that we are meeting the combatant commander's requirements? Thank you, sir.
Okay, first, you're promoted.
Yeah, excellent command of acronyms.
Excellent question. No. I think before we deploy, if we know where we're going to go, we've got some time to do a preparation of the environment and maybe get some advanced permissions. And I think there are some things you can do. Of course, there's always the option to not ask permission. And I say that, I'll give you an example. Now Brigadier General Bill Journey was a battalion commander in Ramadi, and he was running his own public, had a PA system and was running stuff every day after the mosque, after prayers at the mosque. And he said, I'm not supposed to do that. And I said, yeah. Do I need to stop? I said, I don't know what you're talking about. Is it having an effect? Oh, yeah, it's having a great effect. Okay. Don't talk to me about this again. Because we wanted to win. So there's a way around this, whether it's advanced approval, as far as not part of being a MU medal and not having advanced force ops and all that. I'll have to go back, and General Kaufman's here, and he'll have to school me up on this. But we do this. I mean, the naval force, the ARGMU, the naval force that's out there has got to be prepared to go to any country within the region, and they've got to have, maybe pre-approved products or general things. I can also tell you that, and Admiral Stavridis mentioned it, that everybody thinks the Pentagon is really slow, and it can be, but I've also seen it happen. If it's important and there's a mission, I can tell you, I get stuff done in an hour. From the J3 to get ink on a piece of paper from the Secretary of Defense. I mean, if it's got to happen, I'll just tell you.
You did it. I saw it again.
Get it done. Yeah. And as the Commandant, if I, you know, part of my job as a member of the Joint Chiefs or the CNO, you know, we call down to the Joint Staff and we get a little energy behind this stuff. So, you know, I know what the rules say, and we're going to follow the rules, but at the end of the day, you've got to accomplish the mission.
Can I pile onto that real quick?
Please do,
You know, there's an element in this design about partnerships, and one of the partners, if you will, is understanding our place in the interagency. And, you know, some of the things that General Neller's talking about that have moved very fast have ridden on a wave of just terrific relationships and dialogue. You know, particularly the Special Forces are adept at creating those partnerships that build really the trust is what this all, you know, that's the glue that binds us all together. And so it's, I think, extremely important that the first time you go to talk to someone is not for permission to do something that's, you know, a dicey operation in a timely manner. First time, you've been talking to them for months, if not years. And so that there's a relationship on which you can rely to get things done very quickly. And that goes to that soft power, not only interagency, but international. You know, that's the value there.
Thanks, CNO. And just to pick up on that thread, the Coast Guard, of course, is a primo interagency partner and helps bind us with the Department of Homeland Security in terrific ways. And appropriately, Semper Paratus, we have Coast Guardsman for the final question. Sir.
Thank you, Admiral. Good afternoon, gentlemen. I'm Lieutenant Commander Craig Allen. I'm from Coast Guard Headquarters. My question actually starts with just looking at three kind of converging trends. The first one is places that we operate pretty routinely now are becoming more tense, more contentious. Secondly, our operating concepts, for a variety of reasons, are calling for greater distribution, whether it's distributed operations and EF-21, distributed lethality as part of the design for maritime superiority, et cetera. And finally, as we've already mentioned, our communications that we've taken for granted, maybe that's not something that we can rely on all the time. So my question is getting down to the junior officer level and the junior leader level. We're going to have small units in contentious environments that have to make decisions that, as we've seen recently, can have strategic consequences. So from a doctrine and a training perspective, how do we prepare those junior leaders to operate in that environment, make the right decision in very difficult circumstances? Thank you.
Vice Commandant, you want
Well, I get first bye here from my colleague here from Coast Guard Headquarters. Welcome from the snow and the rain down here to San Diego. But as far as the Coast Guardsman goes, this is right up our alley. Coast Guard has always operated in very small units. We have on-scene initiative as one of our organizational doctrine. We have delegation down to the lowest level as our organizational doctrine, and we live and die by that. We live and die by that on the innovation side of the house as well. It's amazing what our coasties are doing out there, you know, with not a lot of resources, just coming up with some incredibly innovative ideas. But that Coast Guard lives and dies on exactly that type of construct that you proposed there. It's interesting you weave in the technological pieces on there and how we have taken sort of net-centric warfare or net-centric operations to heart, but it comes with all this additional baggage that it gives you all this capability, but it comes with all this baggage if you don't have that network capability. I can tell you from a Coast Guard perspective, we focus on that substantially and try to invest in systems that are going to provide us with enough resiliency to be able to survive in that environment so that our folks can actually rely on them. You may not get everything that you want, but you're going to get a reliable system to actually do the nation's business. And we will continue to rely on that on-scene initiative and judgment that is set forth from our both junior enlisted and our junior officers. One other point I want to make, and it's related to this other thing, is we had the gentleman come up there and said, hey, I'll look like you at some point. I'm not necessarily sure that we've set good career paths for our people to actually make those jumps along the way, particularly some of these forward-thinking operators, folks who embrace technology. How are we going to set them up for success in our organization? I can tell you as a Coast Guardsman, goes to your question earlier, sir, we don't have those fundamental decisions made as to how to keep those motivated troops around and provide them with a meaningful career path so that at some point they can be sitting up here as one of the senior leaders providing that direction to our organization. But I appreciate your question because it really goes to the ethos of the Coast Guardsman, which is that on-scene initiative, delegation down to the lowest authority, and providing those troops with resilient and reliable tools to get the nation's business done.
CNO?
I think, well, first of all, you raise a really deep question, and I'm sure you're aware of its depth, but there's a little bit of a tension between network connectivity and independent action. If you let it happen such that you don't give your subordinate commanders, all the way down to junior officers, chiefs and petty officers, you don't give them the freedom to act without calling home because, hey, guess what? I've got the net right here. In fact, I can even have a VTC with you and check you out, visually. So whether I'm all about network resilience, and I think we're moving in the right direction there. Our networks are going to be much more resilient than people give them credit for. But even still, we want to have that freedom of action and that distributed approach. That is what makes us strong in the military, and particularly in the sea services, that ability to act on fleeting opportunities independently. Take your team over the horizon and bring them back stronger and more capable than when you left. With respect to the strategic implications of that, I'm going to segue to the Commandant, if you don't mind, sir. I think General Krulak was the one who outlined the strategic corporal concept, and we found that this is another asymmetric strength of Americans, is that when given the opportunity, it's just in our DNA to sort of pick that mantle up, be extremely creative, extremely astute, and do a terrific job. So, Commandant, I don't know if you want to pick up from there with the Krulak handoff.
Well, we have a very talented force. I just called a group of officers to inform them they've been selected for Brigadier General. And in calling them, I kept thinking about all the other officers I could have called. I mean, it's the incredibly deep and talented bench. And I have great trust and confidence in the men and women that lead all of our services. And I think it's very easy. I mean, you can sit in an operations center and read Merc chat, and you know exactly what's happening. And there's a great temptation to jump in and give advice when you really should just say, okay, I really don't have to ask any questions now because I'm seeing and hearing everything that's happening. My job now is to get things ready to go in case it goes south, or to respond or support here. And I don't need the last thing you want is somebody calling you on the radio or Merc chatting you, like giving you bright ideas. But it's very seductive to be able to want to do that. I think you defeat that, or you manage it, by the way we train and through doctrine. And the Joint Force in the Army calls it mission command. The Marine Corps calls it maneuver warfare. So, I'm paying you money to make decisions. And I give you a mission, and I say, here's the intent of this mission. At the end of the mission, the purpose of the mission is this. Here are the things that you should think about. And at the end, when you're done, I think it should look like this. So if we lose comm, you're out on the Starship Enterprise, and we can't talk to Federation headquarters anymore, and you make the recording to be played at your court-martial as you go into Romulan airspace. That's what you get paid money for. And if the hire did their job and gave you a viable, clear mission statement with rules of engagement, and you understood what to do, then go forth, go where no Coast Guardsman has gone before. And we'll sort it all out in front of the judge when you get back.
Right, that's right.
But I mean, that's what you get, and those are the moments that you live for. I mean, that's why we joined this thing, I think, to be put in a really tough, demanding place, to make really hard decisions, to lead really motivated men and women to do a hard job. I'm just getting excited talking about that.
And I think we got to stop it right there. We'll never top that. Thank you very much. What a great panel. Thank you.
Nice job, Bob.
Well said.
Could I ask you to just hold in place for just a second, please? So admirals and generals, thank you very much for the great insights, and or certainly some vexing and challenging issues that you have to deal with on a regular basis. So on behalf of AFCEA, the Naval Institute, we'd like to present you with a token of our gratitude, a copy of Toward a New Maritime Strategy, American Naval Thinking in the Post-Cold War Era by Peter Haynes, and inside you'll find an AFCEA bookmark. And I ask you just stand fast for just a second, please.
Great. Thank you very much.
All right.
Thanks.
Thanks, sir.
thanks very much. You got it, thanks. All right. Yeah.
Thanks, Bob.
I'm going to take this.
Okay, so if we could just wrap this up kind of quickly, and I'll try to move on very fast here. Before we close, on behalf of our longtime shipmates, the United States Naval Institute, AFCEA, or the Naval Institute led by Pete Daly and a great team that he has, and the entire Naval Institute and AFCEA staff, I'd like to thank you for all of you out here today, as well as our partners. And I'm talking about the many volunteers who helped put this thing on that are out of sight, out of mind in many cases, but certainly without their support, this event never could have gone on. So thank you all very much. And the sponsors and the patrons, without industry,